Jack Kerouac's 1957 novel On the Road is one of the most influential works of literature of all time. Now, a new film is examining the book's legacy. We have director Ebs Burnough here to talk about Kerouac's Road, The Beat of a Nation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
The film's going to be in theaters for one night only, August 8th. It's going to be at the AMC Theater here in Village Crossing. But let's talk a little bit about this film, the impact and the legacy. I mean, almost 70 years later, I mean, just as relevant as ever.
Just as relevant as ever. And, for me, it was very much, I read this book when I was 16 originally, and I was, you know, a young black kid, not even out of the closet yet in northern Florida. And I thought it was a brilliant book, but I'll tell you, I didn't feel like I could go on the road in the same way as Kerouac had. And so it was all these decades later really important for me to make sure that we opened the road up and talked about all the people who couldn't go in the 1950s and even later and have that experience. And so that's kind of been some of the fun of this journey.
I mean, just you mentioning that, I mean, in the 1950s, but even today, someone might not feel comfortable doing this in just certain parts of the country, as well, too.
It's true, but I think we're getting better at it. And one of the greatest things that I learned in this last journey out on the road is, you know what? There's so much more, and this is the magic of the road. There's so much more that brings us together and unites us than divides us. And that's one of the magical things I found in RV parks across the country where it was a I hate Biden or a I hate Trump bumper stickers side by side, but people still communicating quite beautifully. And so it's one of the things that makes us a magical country.
I mean, I want to talk a little bit too about the global impact. Obviously, we talked a little bit about your background, with the book, but also, your time in the White House, senior advisor with Michelle Obama, obviously having that global and, national view. I mean, how did that impact this project, for you?
Massively. I think my life in politics, and certainly the Obamas, one of the greatest things that I learned was empathy. And I think empathy and the ability the curiosity about other people's stories and it not having to always be the same as your story. Isn't, the magic of it all is where we find commonality. And I think that's something that I definitely learned. It's something I definitely learned from Mrs. Obama.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about, just the subject matter and, the road. Obviously, it's not a path, and the roads are winding, and there's different pathways. But to see, that journey that so many people go on, especially in the backdrop of, where this book took place, but also, people obviously it's having such a big impact on so many people, reflective of like their own personal journeys and their roads and the people that they encounter. I mean, let's just talk a little bit, about that part of it.
Yes, we are each on our own individual road. And, and yet, as these kind of little cells, we go out on the road of life as well as the figurative and the literal road, and we bump into one another. And I think one of the greatest things that we have is, we share this moment right now, and then you have a moment later today at the gas station, and I have a moment later today with someone at the supermarket, but we're bumping into one another, and that's humanity. And that without that, we are in a really dark hole. And so we've got to also, what this book and what this film has taught me is we got to put our phones down sometime and we got to get away from the algorithms and get away from the polarizing media and walk outside or get in the car and look out of the window and take a breath and experience the majesty that is our country.
Yeah, that is 100%, so true. And I think there's a big movement about that because, as we get, so addicted to social media and to our phones, we're kind of missing those moments and those connections. And I feel there's a big need for that. And I feel a shift coming on. I feel a shift.
We need human interaction. You can't replace it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about some of the people that you interviewed for the documentary. Obviously both are celebrities and are other folks that are in there as well too, and kind of comparing them to your journey of first reading the book as a teenager.
There's so many great people from Josh Brolin and Matt Dillon to Natalie Merchant and W. Kamau Bell and Jay McInerney. But, I would also say the Natalie Merchant story is really interesting because Natalie had agreed to be in the film and I interviewed her. And then, I don't know, a year later, I sent her a very, very rough cut of the film. And I'm a big fan. And I got this email back and it said, it inspired me. And she had, of course, written "Hey Jack Kerouac," the song with 10,000 Maniacs. And she wrote back and she said, your film inspired me, and I've written a new song, and it's called "In the Land," and it's the closing song of the film. And it was the highlight of one of the highlights of this whole process
Yeah.
because it wasn't commissioned or requested, and it came from within. And so that's something that really mattered. And in the Land is really a song that does take these three journeys, these everyday people journeys, a young kid from South Philly going down to Atlanta to Morehouse College, an amazing veteran Tino who came to America from Cuba at the age of 2, and his wife who are on the road, an almost 70-year-old woman reconnecting with her 90-year-old father. These three stories illustrate the everyday America that we live right now, and how this book and this concept and the road still are relevant and impact us every day.
And speaking of, obviously, we got to talk a little bit about Chicago, your time here. Our city, obviously, a great cross sections of so many different, backgrounds and a melting pot, and but just still a strong sense of community here in our city. I mean, talk a little bit about, the impact of Chicago here on your work and on yourself.
No, no, nobody has a better community than Chicago. Okay. And I first came to Chicago. Well, I've been before, but I went to Northwestern, and then I left, and I always come back to Chicago. Chicago is really, it's home, and it's got a very special place in my heart, and it has impacted me. The city has defined in many ways who I am. And, I learned really about community. I learned about supporting the arts and culture, from Steppenwolf to the Art Institute. These are all places that shaped who I am today. So Chicago has a huge part in not just this film, but in every film I make and in everything I do, because it shaped me. It's shaped me as a person.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for your time today. Kerouac's Road, The Beat of a Nation, coming to us August 8th, one night only, Village Crossing Theater here in Niles. And hope to see you back in our city very, very soon.
Sounds good, Rudy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.